much more where I personally work. The way the organization is structured, for just to make sure folks are aware, underneath Commissioner Lehman, we have 2 deputy commissioners. Deputy Commissioner Glendolyn Thames runs more the workforce development and the business development side. She's really the primary point person that interacts with businesses and companies looking to grow or potentially relocate to the state. My half is more the community development side. My stakeholders that I work more directly with are property owners, developers, municipalities, councils of government, and a ton of interaction with other state agencies. So I am most likely getting calls from the governor's office or others around activities taking place at other agencies. So it's the coordination between Department of Economic Community Development, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, where I spend a lot of my time, a lot of my focus, and that's because the areas that are under my purview that are more sort of place-based, transit-oriented development, waterfront revitalization, capital projects, the Office of the Arts, State Historic Preservation Office, the Office of Tourism, right? They all come together in locations throughout the state, and it's unlocking the potential of those locations that we're most focused on. Less so exactly who inhabits or populates any one building or any one facility, but making sure that we're maximizing the potential of the place so that it's an attractive venue within which to grow or to relocate. So given all that, we've made quite a few changes. I happen to have been appointed late in the prior administration. I was at Department of Housing in the last administration, became deputy commissioner late in or early in 18, and have carried through and have seen kind of some of the change in approach, and I really do think a lot of it is kind of for the better, and we're getting really positive feedback, particularly from the financial community about the direction that we're headed. So I'll talk a bit about that. I mean, some of the big changes that you're seeing is a shift away from grants and back towards loans, a focus on loans that are not competing with or crowding out the private sector's ability to service those clients, but rather looking to focus things like the minority business initiative and others that are targeting the types of companies that might not have the same access to capital that other participants in the community do. Looking more towards leveraging our investments in ways that drive greater private sector return or private sector participation alongside us. That's resulted in some agita out there, to be totally honest, right? A lot of the commercial deals that have gone on were dependent on state subsidy to underwrite the activities of those tenants that led to their coming in or growing and expanding in the state. But I can say that the experience that we've had in just the last few months has really been positive, and we're starting to see some really good signs that this revised approach will bear fruit as well. We've seen companies come in, and I could say, without naming names, definitively from my own direct experience, folks have come in with expectations, based on past practice, looking for significant amounts of grants, asking us to match or exceed what they may be in conversations with other states with. And we've held the line, and we've offered up a series of incentives that we think are better positioned. For example, more of a focus on tax credits or other things that come in after performance criteria are met, rather than upfront investment. And in multiple instances, the companies have decided, I can think of one really good example, again, I can't name names, but a company that had a presence in an other New England state, was looking to expand their operations with a new line, was thinking about doing so in Connecticut, was thinking about doing so in New York, was thinking about doing so in the state within which their baseline is located. And after a bunch of back and forth, while the incentive was not as rich as what they had expected or what they were seeing from some other states, a series of tax credits that came in after job performance targets were met was ultimately adequate, and they decided to make that expansion in Connecticut, revitalizing a dormant facility, preparing for a physical expansion onto the back of that facility, and it was largely due to the quality of the workforce. I mean, that was a real driving force behind the decision making. And so we've really worked hard to focus on those core competencies and those core assets that make Connecticut a smart place for a lot of different companies to locate, rather than trying to incentivize those for which we're overcoming some reason where it may not make the most sense for them to be here. So we've seen kind of a change there, and frankly, it remains to be seen to some extent exactly the way the market responds. But we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, as this is a component of the governor's debt diet, and you've probably heard a lot about that. Constrained capital spending to a significant degree. This is probably even in excess of what the governor had anticipated because of the lack of a bond bill coming out of the prior legislative session. But the governor and the treasurer, the state treasurer, and others have been doing the rounds in New York and Chicago, meeting with the rating agencies, getting very, very positive responses to what they're doing with constraining debt, as well as restructuring some of the pension obligations, the teachers in particular, and for the first time in over a decade, we have positive outlooks from multiple rating agencies, which I think is a pretty strong indicator that we're headed in the right path. A big part of this has to do with a revitalized public-private partnership with CERC, the Connecticut Economic Resource Center, and you all no doubt saw early announcements at the outset of the administration, Indra Nooyi and Jim Smith taking on the chairmanship of that board, as well as a lot of more recent additions to that board, including Jim Laurie from Stanley, and others, the hiring of a new executive director, which is really meant to identify the ways in which a nonprofit actor in the form of CERC and DECD can complement one another to do the best, provide the best level of service to our clients. And so we're seeing a division of tasks there where CERC is much more geared towards business outreach and retention and recruitment, and DECD is on the implementation side. We're taking what we learned from those conversations, utilizing the programs that we have available to us to meet the needs of our private sector and foster the growth that they see on the horizon. A big piece of this, as I alluded to, is that regulatory environment, and I think you've seen a lot of positive things coming out of Department of Energy and Environmental Protection recently. The Commissioner announced not too long ago 20 by 20, her initiative to significantly streamline some of the top concern regulatory processes within 2020. And I can say more kind of broadly, we have a robust partnership across those agencies that's unprecedented in the time that I and my colleagues have been in state government, where we talk regularly, we get together in a collaborative environment around challenges that we see. We have the Permanent Ombudsman, which is in our office, who works with Department of Public Health, Department of Transportation, Energy, Environmental Protection. And I've seen really great response from those agencies and departments in the way in which we can identify challenges that our private sector partners are facing. We are constantly coming up against hurdles, whether it's at the Office of State Traffic Administration or an endangered species matrix for a site that's being redeveloped. And I think we have a pretty positive track record in just the last few months of working through those to allow projects of regional or statewide significance to move forward. We are beginning to pilot a new approach in places like New London, in places like Hartford, places like New Haven, where we've identified key areas of statewide significance, the future of which can play a very meaningful role in changing the direction of the state for the better. And we've identified that in some of those places you may have multiple Department of Transportation projects going on, you may have multiple regulatory regimes at Energy Environmental Protection overlapping, you may have multiple companies or brownfield remediation or capital projects funded through our office going on, and there hasn't always been the best coordination amongst all those parties to ensure that that place is being repositioned for success. And so we've begun to roll out a series of pilots working very closely with the host municipalities. Places like, a good example would be Fort Trumbull in New London, right? A place that is fraught with controversy, with history, has been long dormant, and we've gotten around the table with the city, with the Redevelopment Authority, with Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, Transportation, DECD, and found a solution. And we'll see some near-term announcements there about redevelopment. That's just one small example, but there are a handful of places like that that I think have a disproportionately positive potential for the future of the state. Places like Downtown Crossing in New Haven, places like the South End of Stamford, downtown North in Hartford, etc. Some of our bigger industrial parks, places where if we can get them right, and we can figure out a way to streamline the regulatory process, aligning state and local actions to make investment in those areas as easy as possible, will go a long way in achieving our broader objectives for the state as a whole. One sort of subset of that, but one that's got a lot of attention right now, is certainly opportunity zones. They exist in 27 of our municipalities. They cover 72 census tracts. They are not exhaustive in terms of the places within the state that we are focusing our energy and our attention, but they are very closely aligned with our urban centers, with our transit-oriented districts, with our deep water ports, with our waterfront, with our areas around our anchor institutions, universities, hospitals, higher education, etc. And so they're an interesting place where we can continue to pilot this approach. We've been working closely with those 27 municipalities. You'll see some of this if you attend the conference next week, which we have about pretty close to 300 registered, both project sponsors and investors and project delivery folks. But what we've been emphasizing, I think most strongly, is if you look at the Opportunity Zone program, and I won't go into depth exactly how the tax benefit works. I'm sure many of you are familiar and happy to answer questions about it if you're not, but the biggest incentive is the elimination of the tax on any new gains on your investment if you stay in the deal for 10 years or in the fund for 10 years. And my main takeaway from that is we basically need to convince the marketplace that our communities, our zones, will be worth more in the 2030s than they will be in the 2020s. And the way we do that is by demonstrating that we have a clear vision and a clear approach for where we want to be in those zones. We have a strategy for how we are going to align our state and local capital investment in the public projects that bring the amenity and the level of service and the infrastructure necessary to support that vision. And we have the regulatory environment in place to facilitate and streamline the private sector participation in achieving that vision through development. And so while it's focused on opportunity zones because of the impetus of this tax regulation, I really do believe that the relationship that's being fostered between the state and those 27 municipalities will be a template for an enhanced way to proceed, whereby we are more focused and strategic in the way we invest our capital dollars at the state and local level in infrastructure and in our priorities, and we're very deliberate in the way we align our regulatory environment, zoning in particular, to ensure that if the development community and the investment community is raising their hand and saying, I want to be your partner in this, and we're aligned in the vision that we're looking to collectively implement, that we're going to make that as easy for them as possible. So there's a lot of work yet to be done. There's a lot of remaining programmatic changes at DECD, and there still remains some uncertainty, I know, about exactly how certain programs are going to pan out, and there remains uncertainty around bond capacity that we'll get out of the legislature in the near term. But I think a lot of the early feedback that we're receiving is positive, and there's a lot that we can do and are doing that is not monetary, but will make it much easier to invest in the state with a focus on redevelopment and the enhancement of communities of statewide significance.